The Hill, 2nd of August 2023, the problem with designating China as the real enemy. I believe China to be a foe. They need to be taken very seriously, according to Nikki Haley, who recently emphasized as much. On CNBC's Squawk Box, Haley, a former UN ambassador and current GOP candidate for president, made more explosive statements, accusing China of killing Americans about Beijing's failure to stop the export of fentanyl precursor chemicals to Mexico, which are then smuggled into the United States. Even though Haley's rhetoric about fentanyl is needlessly truthful and provocative, she does have a point. About 70,000 Americans died from opioid overdoses in 2022, mostly from fentanyl, about as many as live in Wilmington, Delaware. China must, without a doubt, be treated seriously. The Chinese side specifically mentioned a spiraling decline in relations between the world's two largest economies, which are still on the verge of reaching global power parity, during a recent meeting between Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Chinese President Xi Jinping. But words do count. In the context of ties between the United States and China, the term enemy is incredibly misleading. Sadly, Haley's words neatly fit the description of the traditional American assumption that only a few evil leaders stood in the way of a worldwide acceptance of American values and hence of peace, a criticism made by historian Eric F. Goldman regarding the Cold War attitudes of some American leaders that are still relevant today. Words like enemy, which represent this heritage, are acts of othering, creating a mentality of us versus them and dividing society. Three issues arise when China is called a true enemy. First, it is not accurate regarding the law of the United States, which defines an enemy as any country, government, group, or person that has been engaged in hostilities, whether or not lawfully authorized, with the United States. Although there have been periods when relations between the United States and China have deteriorated, there hasn't been any genuine hostilities, that is, direct battle between American and Chinese forces, for a long time. Second, it must be made clear that the Chinese Communist Party, which has taken over China, in Haley's words, is the adversary, not the Chinese people. The Chinese Communist Party has officially elevated itself above the government, yet it is clear from the new Chinese discourse that the party does not speak for all Chinese. However, pretending that China would embrace liberal democracy and the West have sent the CCP would be a mistake like the real China, Taiwan. Chinese intellectuals and the general population hold various viewpoints, some even more extreme than the official party ideology. The third and most significant point is that saying China's an enemy plainly portrays relations between the two countries as hostile. Political scientist David Finley states, when decision-makers become overly concerned with enemies, actual or imagined, they tend to lose sight of goals and fail to establish equitable or appropriate priorities in balancing interests. The deliberate itemization of the Zelensky government in Ukraine by Russian President Vladimir Putin is one example, as is his incorrect belief that Russians living in Ukraine are exiled from their native country. Of course, this does not imply that Haley's comments herald an impending American invasion of China. Nevertheless, they risk becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy in which both sides internalize what social psychologist Ralph K. White dubbed the diabolical enemy image. Geopolitical rivals have frequently become foes throughout history due to ideological othering and itemization. Face-to-face communication is a more fruitful strategy to take the China challenge seriously, according to More China Than Haley's Enemy bombast. Such conversations between world leaders have a lot of diplomatic weight. It can help resolve conflicts, promote cultural interchange, and foster consensus, cooperation, and commitment while providing insights into diplomatic priorities. Are some of the bluster coming from the dishonest Chinese government? A notable instance is Secretary Blinken's recent high-stakes trip to Beijing, where he privately met with senior Chinese officials to address escalating tensions between the two countries. Due to Chinese aggression, relations between the United States and China have worsened since the incident involving the Chinese surveillance balloon and Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu's reluctance to meet with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin earlier this year. The Biden administration's objectives to mend and rekindle diplomacy and bilateral relations with China are communicated through Blinken's visit to Beijing. This strategy could be criticized as appeasement. The truth is that communication with an enemy during a fight is essential for preventing an escalation spiral, even if US-China relations devolved into open hostilities and the two states were declared foes. For more shuttle diplomacy between Washington and Beijing, China should consider firing up their real jets, as Haley and others have suggested, to avoid this outcome. This strategy has previously successfully reduced conflict between the United States and China. It has more recently helped to lower tensions between other capitals, which has only resulted in the Allies being duped repeatedly.